What's even more creepy is that the rural scene is sparsely populated in the rural areas of Guangmao. Now, there are bloggers in Wuren village who are mostly visiting remote villages and have photographed the same picture. There are large abandoned villages in Hunan, Henan, Hebei, Guangxi, Yunnan, and other places. Old earthen brick houses and even brand new small Western buildings, and the courtyards are overgrown with weeds.
Every home stands empty. A blogger at the entrance of an abandoned village feels emotions, as if people vanished here suddenly. Visiting last year, there were 8 elderly residents. Now, all are gone, reminiscent of a ghost town. A backpacker stumbles into a mountain village where furniture, appliances, and family albums remain as if awaiting the owner's return. He could only hear the sound of the mountain wind blowing across the dilapidated eaves. He shuddered and described it as being so quiet that people could lie. If the end of the world comes, some bloggers find a large 6-story building in western Hunan, with a new appearance but overgrown weeds. When they walk into a room, the wardrobe is still full of clothes, and the dining table is covered with dust, but the building is still empty. He asks doubtfully, "What happened here? How did everyone disappear overnight?"
On China's deserted lands, cities are empty and rural areas weak. People notice fewer folks around. You might wonder, is it because post-pandemic many haven't returned? Or lifestyle changes mean more stay-home shopping online, rarely stepping out? These factors may slightly contribute, but can't explain the vast population drop nationwide. After all, no matter whether you stay at home or not, you should always be somewhere, not in the city, not in the countryside, not in the subway, and always on the highway. However, today's situation is that the city doesn't see people. I don't see people in the countryside evaporating out of thin air, which makes people think carefully. Is there really hundreds of millions of people disappeared from reality in the last 3 years? While we are still wondering about the deserted streets and lanes, other places are a different story. Hospitals and funeral homes are overcrowded, and this strong contrast between cold and hot seems to provide some clues to the mystery of population disappearance. At the end of 2022, China experienced an unprecedented epidemic tsunami when prevention and control policies were suddenly relaxed. The virus spread rapidly through hospitals, causing fever and breathing trouble en masse. Shockingly, funeral homes faced an urgent crisis. Funeral systems overwhelmed nationwide in cities like Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, Hangzhou. Videos online show hospital morgues stuffed, long hearses queues at funeral homes, cremators burning non-stop. The staff of a crematorium in Beijing said helplessly that the furnace has been running at full capacity, and we have suspended all farewell ceremonies. Family members can only take a last look at the king before cremation. The so-called last look is said to only last 2 minutes at most, because there is a long queue behind. Before the grieving family members waiting for cremation can mourn, they are urged to give up the place, and the next body is immediately pushed into the stove. This scene sounds like a thriller movie.
Yet, it occurred nationwide then. Mr. Zhao, a Shanghai worker, is anxious recounting his ordeal. His grandfather passed from COVID-19 in Hangzhou, but waited 2 weeks for cremation. All 8 to 9 Hangzhou funeral homes crowded. No queuing, cold storage packed with bodies. Bodies had to be kept refrigerated first, incurring daily fees. Zhao recalls Hangzhou's funeral home shifted farewell to the hospital, lasting minutes across 5 days in simple haste, skipping wreaths and music. Satellite images verify the busy crematorium scene then. Maxar's satellite photos in late December 2022 show overcrowded funeral homes in Beijing, Nanjing, Chengdu, significantly exceeding normal levels.
In Chengdu, Dongjiao Funeral Home's December 21, 2022 image, hearses congest administrative areas, contrasting vastly against sparse 2021 imagery. This strong contrast is like night and day, seeing something unusual happen. During the same period, the satellite map of Kunming Funeral Home also showed that the parking lot was extremely crowded. Compared with the live pictures of local residents boarding the boat to the short video platform, no matter day or night, the entrance of the funeral home was always brightly lit, and people flowed constantly. At B, the news from all over the world was shocking, and the demand for the fire field was still in short supply.
In many places, cremation even had to find relationships to cut in line. To cremate in other provinces, the chimneys of funeral homes in Beijing are smoking day and night, and cities such as Wuhan even temporarily built cremators to cope with the surge in the number of bodies. When a long-distance driver passed through Hunan and Hubei, he found that there were funeral halls on both sides of the road along the way. He roughly counted them and drove more than 300 miles along the national road. He actually saw 17 families doing funerals, and only one was doing a wedding.
Happy talk everywhere chills, pointing to a conclusion. Many Chinese perished swiftly, yet official figures differ starkly. Statistics from the National Health Commission and CDC post-lockdown claimed less than 90,000 new crown deaths nationwide from early December 2022 to early February 2023.
Yes, you read that right. The figure of less than 90,000 is ridiculous compared with the queue underground in the crematorium described above. If only tens of thousands of people died, unfortunately, how could it appear? Funeral homes all over the country are full of cremation furnaces, and the actual experience and official data form a strong contrast between death disparity. So the people began to wonder whether the official had greatly underreported the death toll, and the actual death toll may be far more than 90,000. But there's a more alarming figure. An analyst calculated using prior year's average mortality, usually around 850,000 monthly natural deaths in China. If deaths surged during epidemic months, excess death results emerge. Estimates suggest up to 50 million excess deaths between December 2022 and January 2023 alone. That is to say, under normal circumstances, there should be about 1.7 million people in these 2 months. But in fact, more than 7 million people may die, more than 5 million more than expected. This is just a reasonable speculation based on local data and models. The real number may be higher. No wonder some people lament that this epidemic wave may have more people left than in the past few decades combined. If the above calculation is close to the truth, millions of people have been lost in the recent epidemic alone. In the past 3 years, there have been sporadic. How many lives have been lost in the secondary disaster with the strict policy of being close to the people? All this is officially dark, and some people even boldly speculate that after 3 years of epidemic, people who died for various reasons in China may sound appalling with their strange skills. But when we witness the crowded beds in hospitals and endless motorcades in front of crematoriums, there are still empty villages, and it is hard not to doubt the possibility. Beyond tragic human loss, population decline resonates in statistical forums. Officially, only slight population drop claimed, whereas diverse channels reveal conflicting data, sparking doubt. Officially, mainland China's population at 2022 end stood at 1,411.75 million, down by 850,000, marking the first negative growth in over 60 years. Early 2025 released data states another. Population at April end was 1,408.28 million, decreasing by just over 1 million from prior year. In summary, per government stance, China's population hasn't sharply dropped, instead slowly declining past 2 years. This contrasts starkly against initial observations. Is there evidence of far greater population decline than officially stated? Quite a bit. Firstly, Civil Affairs Department data show irregularities. China's death toll stats stem from 2 main sources, one being the yearly count of deaths from the Bureau contrasts with the Ministry of Civil Affairs cremation data. Typically, cremations should align with deaths. Yet, 2021 revealed a large gap. Deaths stood at 10.14 million, according to national figures, but 14.8 million bodies were cremated. Even factoring in cremation rates, deaths might have reached nearly 20 million, exceeding official records. In other words, as early as before the epidemic, China's official demographics had a black hole of millions of people. By the 4th quarter of 2022, the Ministry of Civil Affairs simply did not announce the number of cremated bodies nationwide in that quarter. This abnormal move immediately attracted the attention of the international media. You know, it is obviously abnormal for funeral data to be routine statistical items to suddenly miss. CNN reported that Chinese officials deleted cremation data, which made it impossible for the outside world to accurately assess it. There are signs of the death impact of the tsunami that the official death toll is seriously underestimated. And another information is even more intriguing. In July 2023, the Zhejiang Provincial Department of Civil Affairs disclosed a set of data on its official website. In the 1st quarter of 2023, the number of cremated bodies in Zhejiang province reached 1710,000, a year-on-year increase of 72.7%. In other words, at the beginning of this year, the number of cremations in Zhejiang alone increased by more than 70,000 compared with the same period of last year, while the population of Zhejiang. This accounts for 5% of the national total. If similar trends continue countrywide, the added deaths are massive. In regions less medically equipped than Zhejiang, the situation might be worse. Given Zhejiang's advanced medical infrastructure and high elderly vaccination rate, the epidemic's toll could vastly surpass official figures. Instead of mere hundreds of thousands, deaths might run into millions. The questioned death toll accompanies disputed population statistics, as China's official demographics are continuously challenged. In 2022, a supposed Shanghai public security database leak appeared on international forums, claiming details of 1 billion citizens. As soon as the news came out, public opinion was furious. If this database was really a summary of the national population data, then he implied that the real population of China was about 1 billion, because no one would think that the public security household registration system would miss 400 million people, right? Although some analysis pointed out afterwards that this leaked data contains some duplicates and other information, which may not accurately represent the number of registered households in China, the leaked data of 1 billion people itself is still imaginative. Is China's population actually only in the early 1 billion, even a famous demographer? He also revealed earlier that after obtaining some of the age and gender structure data analysis, he lamented that the severity of China's population crisis is beyond imagination. Yi Fuxian has repeatedly questioned the official high population over the years. As early as 2021, it estimated that China's actual total population is only about 1.28 billion, which is a full 130 million less than the official 1.41 billion announced at that time. If including recent high deaths and low births, China's current population might be nearer 1.1 billion, falling short by nearly 300 million. Yi Fuxian unveiled this population mystery, which some joked exposed inflated figures akin to the emperor's new clothes. Sensational foreign claims similarly emerged. Russian speculation in 2018 suggested Chinese population figures were greatly overstated, estimating closer to 800 million. A Russian statistician calculated based on grain output and demographic data from major cities. Even exaggerated claims of 500 million nationally arose, hinting at inflated urban population numbers. Because the proportion of rural population in China is higher than that in urban areas, it is not only 500 million people, but the rumor of 800 million people has been mentioned again and again. Some commentators believe that the CCP needs to exaggerate its population figures for a long time for the sake of face and strategy, and the actual population may even be less than 1 billion and 1.4 billion, which is a lie to build national strength externally. If this conspiracy theory is put in peacetime, people will probably laugh it off. However, combined with the extraordinary events in recent years, many people have begun to be skeptical. Is it really possible for China? There are only 800 to 1 billion people now. Otherwise, how can we explain the phenomenon of deserted streets and empty buildings? In addition to Russian speculation, the Japanese also provide a unique perspective. Some Japanese researchers once used the consumption of Chinese salt to deduce the population size of China. This method sounds incredible, but it actually makes some sense, because no matter who you are, you have to eat salt every day, and the per capita salt intake is relatively stable with the total population size. How much clue can be seen from a country's annual salt consumption? Japan's Ministry of Health and Welfare is rumored to use the extension number to calculate around 2000. It is estimated that China's population at that time was around 1.4 billion, which was close to the official data at that time. However, in recent years, some Japanese analysts have pointed out that the annual salt sales in China have dropped sharply. According to the same algorithm, it is estimated that the actual population of China has been greatly reduced to about 800 million. At first glance, this is simply saying that the Arabian Nights population can be lost as soon as it is said. This is not a game of eliminating fun, but when we delve into it. However, the data changers have to re-examine this conclusion. In fact, Chinese officials rarely take the initiative to announce the total salt consumption in the country, and they may be afraid that others will follow the clues to see the population.
However, some industry reports and local data still reveal important information. Before 2019, China's annual raw salt production was approximately 67 million tons, a considerable part of which was used for edible salt. By 2022, the annual raw salt production plummeted to 49.86 million tons. It has decreased by 1/4 before. In just 3 years, salt production has dropped so much, which is really amazing. You know, the industrial use of salt is also very wide, and the economic downturn leads to the reduction of industrial words, which can partially explain the decline in output. However, according to the analysis of industry experts, even if factors such as destocking are considered, this decline is still too abnormal, and more importantly, the consumption of edible salt has also dropped sharply simultaneously. Some inventory announcements of salt companies show that the monthly consumption of small packaged salt in Beijing has increased from around 2011. About 6,000 tons dropped to more than 4,300 tons in 2020, a drop of nearly 30% in 10 years. It stands to reason that Beijing's population has increased instead of decreasing in the past 10 years, and the fashion trend of food is also to emphasize research and taste. Why do you eat less and less salt? The only reasonable explanation is that fewer people eat salt. In fact, many places across the country have reported similar declines in salt sales. A statistical study of salt leaf data in 8 provinces and cities shows that the decline varies greatly from place to place. But there is one thing in common. The real population is much smaller than the official announcement. In other words, if the population is counter-calculated according to salt consumption, the actual population of each province has generally shrunk, and the population in many areas may only be 70%, or even about half of that. Salt big data seems to have revealed the secret. China's total population has been declining significantly in recent years, and the decline far exceeds the officially recognized fraction, which is like an avalanche. Some people may say that Chinese people's health awareness has improved, and their diet is light, so less. This sounds reasonable, but it can't stand scrutiny. If you want to say that the taste becomes light. The dishes in Japan and South Korea are much lighter than those in China, but their per capita salt consumption is not much less than ours. Besides, the heavy taste of Chinese people is the famous Sichuan cuisine, coriander, and Northeast cuisine, which is not oily. Look at the hot pot restaurants and salty snacks all over the street, and the hot-selling takeout for 1 year, which doesn't rely on salt to improve the taste, let alone improve the hypertension and heart disease caused by diet. The incidence of wind and other diseases in China has remained high in recent years, so people across the country suddenly eat salt-reduced meals collectively. This explanation is really untenable, so the remaining possibility is that the population has really decreased significantly, so that the total salt consumption in the country has dropped. Besides eating salt, we can also find doubts from other macro data, such as food. Every year, China claims that its grain output is stable at more than 1.3 trillion jin, and it also imports a large amount of grain. If the population drops sharply, there will actually be a surplus of grain. So is there an abnormal decline in food consumption? Some foreign analysts pointed out that China's increase in grain imports in recent years may not be due to the increase in population, but due to the participation in internal grain production. If the population is really small, the demand for grain will decline, which will explain why the national grain depot is often full or even deteriorated. However, the food problem involves too many problems. There are also energy consumption, electricity use, active number of mobile phone numbers, etc., all of which are used as side diseases to estimate the population. Some netizens teased, maybe. Please show private indicators such as Li Keqiang's index, electricity, freight volume, loan issuance volume, etc., and a population index can approach the truth. However, no matter which angle you cut it from, all signs point to the same direction. There is a huge water in China's population figures, or it is concealed. This is not over yet. Even the big names in the scientific and technological circles have come to participate. Elon Musk's new artificial intelligence Grok 3, which went viral on the internet this year, gave a shocking answer. According to comprehensive calculations, such as China's consumption data during the Spring Festival in recent years, between 2020 and 2023, China's population has decreased by approximately 150 million to 200 million people. This conclusion made everyone who saw it gasp. Did Musk's AI break something? It is said that someone used this powerful AI model to input various macro data in China in recent years, including changes in consumption such as gifts, food, transportation, catering, etc., during the Chinese New Year, combined with the plummeting birth rate and mortality rate. The factor AI finally deduced that nearly 200 million people in China have disappeared in 3 years. Musk himself has not officially announced this number, but some critics on the internet have quoted it as saying that even artificial intelligence can't stand the CCP's population, quite reported. Of course, some experts are skeptical about this, thinking that it is impossible to reduce so many people by birth in just 3 years, which only shows that the astonishing death toll is concealed. In any case,
when the cold algorithms pointed to the huge invisible population gap, we had to face it squarely. Possibly, China's population collapse may be far more serious than imagined. After the above analysis, we have collected many clues about the disappearance of population in urban and rural areas. The unusual busyness of funeral homes, the huge contrast between official and folk data, various estimates of China's population at home and abroad, and all kinds of evidence are intertwined, painting a possible picture that makes people stand. China's actual population may be far lower than the official 1.4 billion, with a decrease of hundreds of millions of doses, or even 3. So where did the 400 million Chinese people who disappeared go? How terrible is the truth? The first possibility is that most of these 400 million people have never really existed. They may be the product of statistical fraud and population data moisture. For a long time, when local governments at all levels in China report population data in order to get more financial allocations or present evidence, there may be a phenomenon that they have to report population. For example, in some places, 1 million people reported to be 1.2 million. In the family planning era, in order to complete the superior indicators, the number of superbirths was concealed, or some deceased people in the household registration system were not cancelled in time, resulting in a huge gap between the official book figures and the actual population accumulated in a few decades of ghost population. Just as after the disintegration of the Soviet Union, it was found that statistics were seriously flooded. If Chinese officials have been exaggerating the population, then the so-called 1.4 billion may be a phantom. The real peak population of China may never reach 1.4 billion, or even less than 1.3 billion. Scholars such as Yi Xian believe that China's population began to grow negatively around 2018, and the previous census data may have overestimated 100 or 200 million people. If it is true, then a considerable part of the so-called disappearing four memories is actually the bursting of the statistical bubble after it was punctured. It is not that someone really disappears, but a numerical correction. The second possibility is that a considerable number of people have died abnormally in recent years.
Or premature death for 3 years, whether a large number of elderly people died from illness caused by the virus itself, or secondary disasters caused by strict risk control, such as delayed medical treatment and suicide accidents, etc., may lead to a surge in the number of deaths, a run on vaccine sequelae, and even various sudden deaths and serious illnesses that have been strangely prevalent in recent years. Many middle-aged people in their 40s and 50s have suddenly died of severe illness in recent years. This is not isolated, but a quite common phenomenon. A Mr. Xu from Jiangxi.
The middle-aged people around him have frequently heard about the sudden death of tumor cerebral hemorrhage infarction in recent years, and feel that the national population of 1.1 billion is gone. If the real situation is close to what he perceives, then the number of people directly or indirectly taken away by the epidemic in 3 years is probably tens of millions of doses, or even hundreds of millions. In this case, a large part of the 400 million people who disappeared are the souls quietly sleeping in the yellow. Their departure has not been truthfully recorded.
Within the negligible 90,000, the billowing smoke from the crematorium and the crying of countless families proved that they really existed, and they really left the possibility that the sharp population decline was also related to ultra-low fertility, although this was another dimension of the disappearance of the population.
The absence of newborns, rather than the extinction of the existing population, will also affect the total population size. In the past few years, China's birth rate has dropped off a cliff, with the number of births dropping from 18 million to less than 8.5 million every year, and the number of newborns accounting for less than half of the death toll. The natural population decline is accelerating. If the official data is correct, China has experienced a net decrease of more than 1 million per year in the past 2 years. However, if the official exaggerates the number of births and reduces the number of deaths, the actual net decrease may be even higher, such as in 2022. The former official said there were more than 9.5 million births and 10.4 million deaths, a net decrease of 850,000. However, some scholars believe that the actual births may only be in the early 8 million, but the deaths far exceed the official number, so tens of millions of people may be tested in 2022. If this continues, the unborn people will gradually become a part of the disappearing demographic that cannot be ignored. Of course, the above factors are not independent of each other, but may be the result of joint action. The real truth may be the superposition of multiple reasons. The squeeze out of water also leads to the occurrence of population disasters and the inevitable decrease caused by the aging of population structure. That is to say, the process of China's population from 1.4 billion to 1 billion may be partly due to the fact that the paper figures are true, and partly due to the blank created by living human tragedies. If all this is close to the truth, then the so-called terrible truth is actually ready to come out. A major nation with 1.4 billion people might quietly lose its population advantage. To lose 400 million people equals the sudden vanishing of the US and Canadian populations combined, or removing 3 Japan-sized populations from the map. This change represents the disappearance of growth since China's opening up, impacting society profoundly. With a reduced labor force, aging intensification, a shrinking consumer market, unsold houses, and heavy social security burdens, problems arise. Clues include many control houses in real estate lately, 80 million vanished tenants, causing anxiety for landlords, and poor school enrollments nationwide.
The drop in the university admission line indicates fewer teenagers in Shilin. The sharp population decline's impact pervades the economy and society like an unseen force. It's just that the authorities don't want to admit it directly. For ordinary people, the most direct feeling is that the familiar people around them have disappeared one by one. Maybe the neighbors have moved away and never came back. Maybe the old man who walks his dog every day in the community suddenly disappears. Or a few frequently contacted friends in the mobile phone address book suddenly can never dial every disappeared individual, behind which are the joys and sorrows of a family. And when this disappearance occurs on the scale of hundreds of millions of people, it is not just home, or the problem of hell, and become a secret upheaval of national character. What's chilling is that we can only peek through the crying of the weed hospital in the vacant village of the subway. But we can't get an authoritative explanation. So why is the truth so hard to touch? To a large extent, this is because relevant information is strictly controlled or even distorted, and population data is highly politicized and sensitive information. Internally, the government needs to maintain statistical credibility and policy face, while externally, it needs to show the power and market size of a big country. If it is suddenly announced that the population is hundreds of millions less, it will undoubtedly cause shocks and doubts at home and abroad. Therefore, even if the high-level officials know some real situations, they tend to selectively announce them or simply pretend to be deaf and dumb, exchanging time for space. There is no fire in paper. When there are too many lies and too many loopholes, it will arouse more turbulent suspicion and discussion, which is why all kinds of conspiracy theories are prevalent nowadays. The more the official doesn't say it, the bolder the people guess. Some people suspect that hundreds of millions of people who died from the epidemic have been concealed. Some people think that the population collapse has been concealed in advance. There are even more outrageous imaginations, such as the alien kidnapping theory, the parallel world dislocation theory, etc. Although it is a joke, it reflects the public's anxiety and thirst for the truth. Of course, I don't intend to give an exact numerical conclusion again, because frankly speaking, except for high-level officials with comprehensive data, no one can know exactly how many people there are in China now, even if they themselves may be worried about how to compile this number, so as to cover up the truth without being too outrageous. However, through our previous analysis, we can safely say that China's population is definitely not what officially claimed. There was only a small decline, but a rather serious decline. The magnitude of this decline was likely to far exceed 100 million, and it was very likely to reach more than 200 million. Even 3,400 million was not entirely impossible. The figure of 400 million may include the bubble hidden in the past and the recent tragedy. Truth is more terrible than rumors. If it surfaces one day, it will shock the world. Where are the Chinese people whose ultimate problem disappeared wantonly? Maybe the answer is not mysterious. In fact, only 2 words are gone. Some numbers have lost water, and some lives have lost breath. No matter which one, it makes people sigh and heartbreak. Once, China's population was regarded as a heavy burden and a great dividend, but now it is in strange statistical fog and cruelty. In the reality of the epidemic, hundreds of millions of people seem to have walked into a black hole, invisible and intangible, leaving only a huge one. This unsolved population case is still going on. At present, Chinese officials are still claiming that the economy is prosperous and full of vitality, but the silence and air on the streets cannot fool you and me in daily life. Maybe many years later, when the dust settles, some people will seriously take stock of this period. The demographic changes during this period tell the truth to the world, but before that, this mystery remains. Are the 1.4 billion Chinese still there in people's minds? If not, what is the terrible truth? Whenever you walk in empty streets or pass through uninhabited villages, do you think of this question and feel a little chilling? The truth may be late, but it will not be absent after all. Truth is more amazing than lies. We can only stay awake and curious, continue to look for answers, and wait for the day when the fog clears.